Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. So by the title of today's video, you can tell that this is going to be the 12 nonfiction books that I hope to get to before the year is over. I was inspired to do this video by Gloria Z. Thompson. I will leave her channel as well as her video where she does her own nonfiction reads linked in the description box down below, so please be sure to check that out. But I didn't really get to talk about any nonfiction books in my 22 books for 2022 video, but I decided to just make a whole video dedicated to it because that video was already long enough, so here we are. Anyways, we have quite a few books to get through, so let's get started. I'm not going to go into the deep synopsis of all of these. I'm going to try to just give like little blurbs here and there, but y'all know I like to talk and I like to talk about books, so we'll see how this goes. But the first book that I have here is The Power of Moments: Why Certain Experiences Have Extraordinary Impact by Chip Heath. So this is a book that I was actually recommended on Bookstagram. I'm blanking on her name and I'm so upset that I'm forgetting it, but she read this book, reviewed it, and I just loved like how the book sounded, so I knew I had to pick it up, and I read a sample of it and it sounds just so good. It's holding my interest already. But this is a book that examines why and how certain milestones and moments are powerful and impactful. So for example, why do we put so much weight and so much, hype and emotions on graduating or weddings, or why do we tend to focus on the best or the worst of a moment, or why do we always remember the best moment and forget all of the rest? You know what I mean? So it's just all of that type of stuff wrapped up into this book. It also talks about how brief experiences can change our lives. So for example, when we meet maybe our significant other for the first time, or when we meet our best friend, those type of moments. I just love learning, and I love learning about random things like this, and I understand why we put certain expectations and emotions on things like graduating or milestones like getting married or getting a house or your first apartment, etc. But I just want to know the science behind it and the psychology behind it, because I used to be a psych major, believe it or not. I used to be a psych major, so this stuff still fascinates me, and I'm really excited to read this one. The next book that I have here I actually mentioned in my most anticipated book releases of 2022 video, but it is Let's Get Physical: How Women Discovered Exercise and Reshaped the World by Danielle Friedman. So this is the untold history of women's exercise culture, from jogging to jazzercise, and Jane Fonda. So this book pretty much just explores what it says, how women got into exercise culture and how it became what it is today. It also talks about how women play into the athleisure trend, I'm assuming, and just how a lot of our experiences with working out really does shape a lot of what we see today. So SoulCycle, Peloton, cycling and spinning in general, hot yoga, etc. I'm not a gym junkie by any means. I'm hoping I can become one this year. I used to be really into the gym last year before I went on my vacation, but like I flopped. But I'm hoping to get back into it, and this just sounds so fascinating. I love learning about random things, like I said, and this is right up my alley. And I've heard nothing but great things about this book already. For the people that were approved for like a arc of this, they said it was really good, so I can't wait to read this one. So the next book that I have here is The Only Plane in the Sky: An Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff. So this is self-explanatory, but this is an oral history / an account of victims, survivors, loved ones, first responders, and more who recount 9/11 and what was taking place that day, not just in New York City but also in DC as well as Pennsylvania. And I heard that the audiobook for this is really good, and most people say you should listen to that versus reading the physical book, so I will be doing that. There are different narrators for all of these type of recounts, and I just heard that there are so many different emotions and experiences through each and every single account and story, and I'm just really nervous because I know I'm gonna get choked up and I'm gonna get really upset, because anytime I watch any documentary or read anything on 9/11, I break down. I just get so choked up and I end up in tears. So I know that this is going to be a really difficult read, but I'm still excited to read it nonetheless. I've heard nothing but great things about it, and it's history, so I definitely need to read it and give it a try. So the next book that I have here on my list is actually a book that Gloria has on her TBR, but I was listening to this on Libby, but I had to return it because the loan was up, and also it was just too much for me to listen to at the time, so I'm going to return to it. But it is Columbine by Dave Cullen. This is a book that is pretty much just giving you the rundown and a play-by-play on how Columbine unfolded. So for those of you who do not know, Columbine was a mass shooting that took place here in the United States, specifically in Colorado, and it was on April 20th, 1999, and unfortunately 13 people were murdered at the hands of two gunmen that attended the school. So this audiobook that I'm listening to is so good, but it is so gut-wrenching because the narrator has such a deep, powerful voice, and you can feel him getting frantic as certain chapters go on and certain events play out, but then you also hear him getting very somber and very melancholy and bleak as other chapters go on. So my emotions were just like a roller coaster, up and down, but I really want to return to it. I got about 26% in, so I want to finish it, and I'm going to, but it is just really difficult to get through because some of the things that you hear in this is just really, really depressing and so heartbreaking, and I just feel for all of the victims especially, and their families and the survivors and their loved ones and everyone that remembers that day and was unfortunately a part of it very vividly. I feel for them and I empathize with them. So I really want to continue this because Dave Cullen does a phenomenal job at clearing up a lot of misconceptions that were centering around Columbine. There was so much misinformation that came out during that day and the days after, as well as the weeks and months and even years. There were so many different things that were coming out and they just weren't true. So Dave Cullen even admitted to reporting on some of those misconceptions and clearing that up in the book and talking about how, you know, as journalists, they need to get better at not always being the first, but making sure that they put accuracy and quality before quantity and speed. So I just thought that was really, you know, great for him to say, because as someone that's in the comms industry, he's absolutely right. I agree 100%. So get back into this one, and I just hope that I can like finish it in like one go. Next book that I have on this list was also written by Dave Cullen, and it is called Parkland, and this is similar to Columbine, but instead of this focusing on Columbine, this is a play-by-play on how Parkland unfolded. And for those of you who do not know, there was a mass shooting that took place at a high school in Florida called Stoneman Douglas, and also known as Parkland, like this area, and this gunman who attended the school ended up killing 17 people, and this was one of the most deadliest school shootings that we have ever seen. And so this one took place back in February of 2018, February 14th, 2018, and I was actually in college when this happened, and I remember when the news broke and it was devastating. I really want to read this one similar to Columbine. I think I'm going to listen to the audiobook. I know that this is also going to be gut-wrenching and really, really fresh because this was not too long ago, and I think the trial is actually still unfolding. So yeah, I know that this is going to be another gut-wrenching read, so I'm gonna have to space this and Columbine out because I know it's gonna put me like in a not so great headspace, but again, important reads, and I really want to understand all that I can about these shootings and why they happen and how we can prevent them moving forward. That I have on this list is called I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that. I really tried to get the pronunciation of her name, but she is an activist slash an advocate who is really outspoken about women's and young girls' rights, specifically education. She really wants to make sure that young girls have the access and the right to a fair and equal education. And because she was so outspoken about this, and because she was doing everything she can to bring light to this issue, she was unfortunately targeted by the Taliban and was almost murdered. So she of course survived, and she wrote this book to tell her journey before, during, and after the whole situation. And I just really want to read this one. I definitely look up to Malala. She is such an inspiration, and everything that she has done and is doing for young girls and women across the globe is phenomenal, and it cannot be understated. So I can't wait to give this one a read. So the next two books I have on here, I actually have the physical copies of, and they are A Stolen Life, a memoir by J.C. Dugard, and then My Story by Elizabeth Smart. With A Stolen Life by J.C. Lee Dugard. So J.C. was actually a child in the 90s, and she was unfortunately kidnapped by this man, and she was held in captivity for about 18 years. So J.C. lost a lot of time with her family and just time being a child, and also just living a quote-unquote normal life. So this is pretty much her just talking about her story and, you know, controlling the narrative and giving the reader an experience and a glimpse into how life was really like for her, as well as how she's recovering and how she's still going through the motions of, you know, picking up the pieces now as an adult who survived this ordeal. So I can't wait to read this one. I have read a lot of stuff about J.C. Lee Dugard's story because I'm really into true crime. I watch ID a lot, and I have researched J.C.'s case, I feel like, in depth, but the fact that she wrote her own memoir, and this gives more detail, of course, and this comes from her actual like mouth, I'm really excited to read this. On to My Story by Elizabeth Smart. So similar to J.C., Elizabeth was kidnapped when she was a child. She was held in captivity for about 8-9 months, and I think she was kidnapped when she was about 14. So similar to J.C., again, she just talks about, you know, before, during, and after the incident, and how she's picking up the pieces and moving forward with her life. So again, I know that these are going to be really great books, very upsetting, very triggering, very disturbing, but I cannot wait to read these nonetheless, and I'm really happy that these two women made it out and that they're both here to tell their story. The next book that I have here is called Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen: The Emotional Lives of Black Women, written by Dr. Inger Burnett Ziegler. So Dr. Burnett Ziegler is actually a psychologist, and this book pretty much explores the way that we praise the strength and the resilience of Black women, but this also explores trauma and how adversity have led to a deep emotional pain and shaped the way that Black women walk through the world world. So I'm assuming that this is going to talk about the ripple effects from slavery, as well as just the lasting effects and impacts of racism in general and white supremacy and colorism and all of that. So really looking forward to reading this one. I know that, again, a lot of these are going to be very triggering and very deep and dark reads, but I want to educate myself. I want to read more of these, and I just think that these are too important to not be read. Next book that I have on here is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So I feel like a lot of people have read this book and put this on their favorite books of the year list, as they should. Even though I haven't read it yet, I can only imagine how powerful, impactful, and amazing this memoir is. So Chanel Miller was the victim of Brock Turner in the Stanford sexual assault case, and so Chanel, again, just like JC and Elizabeth Smart, she's taking back the narrative and she is controlling it herself and writing the story and this memoir to pretty much shed light on what she was going through and all of the emotions that she was experiencing while she was going through this trial, as well as just, you know, really looking at how the public was reacting to the outcome of the trial itself and Brock Turner. So again, another one that I'm really looking forward to reading, but I know that this is going to be very dark, but I feel like this is probably going to end up on my favorites list. I feel like this is going to be a 5-star prediction. I'm calling it now. So yeah, can't wait to pick this one up though. So the second to last book that I have on here is called My Invented Country by Elizabeth Allende, and this is a memoir that just explores the events and life of Elizabeth Allende while she was growing up in Chile. She lived there until her father's cousin, President Salvador Allende, was assassinated. So this pretty much just takes her on a highly personal tour through her homeland and bringing it to life and just documenting her triumphs and tribulations and everything along those lines. I just feel like this is going to be really good. This is another one that has a lot of great reviews, so really excited to read that one. And the last book that I have on here is actually very lighthearted, so I'm glad we're ending off on a positive note, and it is called From Hollywood with Love: The Rise and Fall and Rise Again of the Romantic Comedy by Scott Meslow. So I saw a Book with Olive talk about this book in one of her, I think, most anticipated releases videos for nonfiction, and this one is right up my alley, okay? Y'all know I love romance. I'm also a hopeless romantic, and I love rom-coms, and I'm always sitting back wondering, where are the rom-coms? Where are the rom-coms? Why are we not making them like we used to, you know? Like, I saw that J-Lo, real quick, I saw that J-Lo is going to star in a new rom-com, and I'm glad that she's getting back to her bread and butter. Exactly, give us all of the rom-coms, because that's what I want. But anyways, this is an in-depth celebration of the romantic comedy's modern golden era and its role in our culture, as well as just tracking the genre from its heyday in the 80s and the 90s and its unfortunate decline in the 2000s. So yes, I'm really sad that we don't get rom-coms like we used to, because the 2000s was just the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, but like even the early 2000s before it went on the decline, we just had so many great rom-coms, man. Like Made in Manhattan, we had, you know, The Wedding Planner. I'm just like rattling them off right now, but we had so many great rom-coms. Failure to Launch, What Happens in Vegas, even though that came out a little bit later. But yeah, either way, really excited to read that one, because I love rom-coms. I love the history of rom-coms and just romance in general. So I just know that I'm going to devour this book whenever I get my hands on it. All right, y'all, and those are 12 nonfiction books that I hope to read before the year is over. Of course, there are going to be more nonfiction books that are released this year. There's also going to be nonfiction books that I just come across in general, whether that's because I'm in a bookstore or because I'm on my iPad or on Bookstagram or BookTube. I'm going to come across more, but for right now, these are the 12 that I really want to and plan on getting to before the year is over. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me and my channel out, and I would really appreciate it. Please also consider following me on Bookstagram as well as Storygraph. I will leave that information linked down below as well as at the end of the video, and I hope to see you guys in my next one. Bye!